And so on that same date that I'm told the NewEarth frequency ratcheted up, coincidentally or not, I decided to leave my client after 12 years and retire from my IT consulting profession after 26 years.
Unlocking the Soul, hosted by Rob Simperman and produced by Simplify Films. Episodes cover mature and controversial themes. Consider this when deciding whether and when to watch.
Topic 61, minding our own business. I like to focus on practical tools when I can, so in addition to self-hypnosis, here's 2 more. While researching this video, I happened to read a book called The Let Them Theory, a life-changing tool millions can't stop talking about. The author, Mel Robbins, helps us adopt a mindset to stop wasting energy on what you can't control and start focusing on what truly matters, ourselves and our deliberate actions. I realize that this is exactly what we're talking about here. She says that when someone is doing something that you don't agree with, instead of getting dragged into it, opposing it directly, or trying to change their mind about it, simply say, let them. It's their decision, their reaction, their worldview driving them to take that action. Then separately say, let me, and decide what, if anything, makes sense for you to do based on your power, morals, worldview, and the consequences you expect in your own life. She gives numerous wonderful examples. But what struck me is that this is exactly the way to exist without going crazy in the cognitive dissonance of this third, fifth density splitting world. When someone cuts you off on the freeway, you could follow them into the depths of a low frequency response, laying on the horn, tailgating, brake checking, flipping them the bird. Or you can say, let them, and decide if there's anything that you can do that would be helpful to you in your own life or safety of others. Maybe it makes sense that you pull your car away from that driver who is possibly distracted or unskilled or poorly adjusting their mirrors. Or maybe they're just having a bad day. So training your mind to initially turn to let them is a form of letting go. It's similar to the meditation concept of giving yourself space before reacting. Seeing yourself in your own body and noticing the thoughts and emotions your brain presents you with before deciding what your inner wisdom is telling you to do. It's not advocating always minding your own business, but intervening only when it makes sense to. And we're not slaves to our thoughts or emotions, remember. This is how we maintain our higher frequency when the world tries to draw us down. More practical advice comes from one of the leading minds on the law of attraction, Esther Hicks. She's an American motivational speaker, author, and the channel of a being known as Abraham. She co-wrote 9 books with her husband, Jerry Hicks, presented numerous workshops on the law of attraction, and appeared in the original version of the 2006 film, The Secret, though not in the final version. Her channeled source, Abraham, teaches that the source of everything is life-affirming, expansive, and creative. It embraces well-being, adores individuals, and understands the broadest intentions. The philosophy invites people to relax to their natural state of well-being and recognize that all is well. She and her followers believe that minding your own business is not about being ignorant of the world, but about focusing on what your own emotional and vibrational state is. This practice is considered the secret of the universe. You create your own reality through your focus and vibrations. What others do, believe, or desire is their own creative reality, and engaging with their negativity can compromise your own alignment. Here are some of the key principles. Your mood is your only business. Your primary responsibility is your emotional well-being and your alignment with the source energy. Everything else is secondary. By managing your mood, you take charge of your own life and create the reality you want and deserve. Practice ignoring vibration. Deliberately ignore conversations, subjects, or vibrations that you don't want to or don't need to participate in that pull you down. Instead of focusing on negative aspects, direct your attention towards positive feelings. Allow others their reality. Minding your own business is also about practicing the art of allowing. This means letting go of judgment and allowing others to create and experience their own reality. It should be free from your interference or resistance. This does not mean you have to agree with them, but you must allow them to be themselves so that you can focus on your own vibrational alignment. Next, detach from external influence. The teachings emphasize that the focus should always come back to the self. Your greatest manifestations and positive changes will happen when you stop giving your energy away to others in the form of thoughts or emotions. Avoid belching resistance. Abraham describes a person who creates unnecessary trouble for themselves and others by creating resistance. This happens when you get involved in situations that are not your own, causing a vibration that's not necessary. 62. The rising earth and my own Atlas Shrugged moment. Now, I've talked a lot about DoloresCannon, the pioneering regression hypnotherapist, and see episode 3 of this podcast for more on her and her bio. Her research suggested that the Earth's electromagnetic pulse, or heartbeat, has been increasing in frequency since at least the 1980s. This acceleration was perceived by many as a sensation that days were passing more quickly, a phenomenon that continued to intensify in the years following. Now, I'm not convinced by the evidence that the Schumann resonance is relevant here. Many point to this set of spectral peaks in the low-frequency portion of the Earth's magnetic field. Here you can see one of many daily updates targeted toward the spiritually awake. My preferred evidence comes from Cannon's book, The 3 Waves of Volunteers in the NewEarth. It describes hypnotherapy reports of numerous souls who incarnated on Earth at different periods to help the planet's vibration. The first wave, born after World War II, were volunteers who struggled the most with Earth's dense energy, but were crucial for clearing the path. The second wave, born in the 1970s and 80s, these were individuals acting as antennas of positive energy and found it easier to adapt to the shifting frequencies. And the third wave, starting in the 1990s and after, was a wave of children and young adults who came prepared to handle the higher vibrations and to complete the Earth's transformation. As a result of this increasing frequency, Cannon taught that the Earth was splitting into 2 separate realities, the old Earth, which would continue on its low vibration path, and the new Earth, which would exist on a higher, more positive frequency. While both Earths exist simultaneously, those on the new Earth would eventually become completely unaware of the old one. Cannon's work suggests that by the late 2000s, and by this I mean 2008 or so, give or take a year, the waves of volunteers had been successful in preventing the world's destruction. That's the version that Nostradamus famously foretold, similar to what the story of Noah and others describe too. This time around, by tipping the scales of energy, there is a new Earth in our future. The chaos described in her findings was part of the transition point between the old lower frequency energies and the impending higher frequency era. I dive deeper into the timing of the inflection point, the final pop over from the new Earth in episode 19, but recall there Guy Needler described, quote, when there's around 10% of the normal souls left and 90% of the backfill people, that's when those other souls will be taken out, which was foretold to happen in the next 150 to 200 years. And Maureen St. Germain spoke to me about a 3-generation overlap, of which we're currently about halfway through, so another 30 years or so. Needless to say, we are in the midst of a shift, even if details are hard to nail down. In my own life, I believe that the 2008 or 9 timeframe that Cannon pointed to was influential on me personally. That's when I felt the most significant shift from being somewhat egocentric, overly career-driven, and closed off to spiritual possibilities, to basically doing a 180. That's when I first embraced Buddhism and followed that path to spiritualism in a way that would have earned disdain from my former self of just a few years earlier. But that's not all. I mentioned a channeled message through a trusted spiritualist friend of mine revealed that May 18th of this year was another significant milestone in the increasing of the Earth's frequency. With the significance of this date unbeknownst to me at the time, that was the time I concluded that I no longer resonated with my job and career. In fact, my employer over most of the previous 12 years, which I recently described as my favorite client, it began to feel repulsive to me, and I use that word intentionally, like 2 north poles of magnets repelling each other. And so, on that same date that I'm told the new Earth frequency ratcheted up, coincidentally or not, I decided to leave my client after 12 years and retire from my IT consulting profession of 26 years. So what happened to cause this? The culture changed rapidly, just as I was changing in the opposite direction. This is a housing finance organization, and the new government administration seized power over it early this year in dramatic fashion. installing their man as both the chairman of the board there and as well as its sister organization, and put the same man in charge of both of their federal regulator, removing the objective oversight. They immediately took drastic steps, like firing our CEO and head of HR, both well-respected women. They killed anything that could be connected to diversity in the environment, killed flexible work arrangements, and then started deep layoffs. This came at a time when I was feeling more in tune with my spiritual side, looking at converting my videos into this podcast series to share my important messages. So I decided it was time to leave. I told my director, who I respect very much, that I wouldn't renew my contract when it expired in 1 month. Literally the next day, she was fired herself without any notice and had to be out that same day, despite needing to transition her very important responsibilities. So of course, that all reinforced that I was making the right decision. I continued for the month of June as I promised, and now I am a full-time podcaster, researcher, and parent. Not everyone has the freedom or lifestyle to leave a job that doesn't resonate. Most families have mortgages, little safety net, single incomes, or are new to their careers, whatever the barriers. It's always been the case, and it helps make life more challenging. But people will feel the push, the repulsion over time, as the frequency of the organization or the individual changes. Others who are attracted to the new frequency will be drawn into it. There's always people around to work in any organization. And if you doubt me, 83,000 people working at the Philip Morris cigarette company prove this point, wherever they manage to find them all. This event in my life reminds me of a very influential book on me, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. One of several themes is that productive work is depicted as the noblest human activity. The producers, industrialists, engineers, artists, are the Atlas figures who hold up the world, while the looters, government bureaucrats, and non-producers exploit their output through excessive regulation and forcing them into collectivism and sharing their production. The inevitable result is the situation leads to the producers shrugging off the weight of the world and retreating basically to a commune or a new earth, so to speak, that better resonates with their frequency. I mentioned that we move up and down frequencies on a daily, hourly, or even minute-to-minute basis. So what's that like? Well, maybe I see an online discussion of a politically charged topic or something that really triggers me. I feel myself entering that fight-or-flight mode. That's where the amygdala kicks in. That's the oldest part of the brain, the so-called reptilian brain, because it developed before mammals even diverged from reptiles. And when I get defensive and feel the need to confront the opposing viewpoints, I get pulled into the interaction with a group of people that I don't normally notice at all. Whether you consider them internet trolls or just people with views that I perceive as bigoted or ego-driven or narcissistic, they push me into polarizing my own views, which they surely see as naively liberal or worse from their perspective. Or maybe I try to win using the very same strategies they're using. That reptilian brain mode may even be the origin of the prophecies and conspiracy theories about reptilians taking over our society and institutions. You could say our current leadership in the United States is aligned with the amygdala or reptile mind these days, more than any other time in recent memory. But when I extricate myself from these interactions, calm down, focus on friends, family, or even mindful activities like exercise or chores or podcasting, I feel completely different. I feel high frequency or even new earth. Another way to think about the new earth separation is that this division is becoming more permanent with the fewer interactions we have that bring us down. How exactly? Remember, we used to have geographically oriented communities. So there'd be some like-minded people in our town, but we'd run into those we disagree with quite often and get into fights or debates regularly. Then we entered the information age around the turn of the last century, where we could self-select our online communities and groups. At the same time, our personal interactions became more and more transactional with other humans, and even then completely automated. But now in the post-information age, or even the post-truth age, if you are a fan of an objective truth, we've gone so much further. Now we literally block our ears with earbuds while sharing physical space with strangers. We don't self-select, but rather algorithms choose which communities to show us based on behaviors that we ourselves might not even notice. That drives which points of views to expose us to. And our news media even feeds us different sets of facts, Recent experience shows people don't mind being told lies as long as it matches our assumptions. One group is told that immigrants and people with non-binary genders are being abused by an authoritarian government, necessitating our protest to avoid all women, all marginalized groups, and eventually all citizens from facing the same fate that most past fascist leaders followed. The writing's on the wall. Heck, the leaders aren't even hiding these intentions anymore. At the same time, the other side's truths are that immigrants are responsible for your lost job and your need to protect your family with the weapons. You need to remove them before they violate your loved ones and pollute your gene pool. How can both be correct? While both play up kernels of truth, both perspectives resonate with the group aligned with those frequencies. Facts be damned. So consider a passage from the always perceptive J.R.R. Tolkien on the matter of when it's time to move on. Frodo says in The Fellowship of the Rings, "I am old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I'm beginning to feel in my heart of hearts, well preserved indeed. Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean, like butter that has been scraped over too much bread." This quote expresses the feeling of being depleted and in need of a change. And later in The Lord of the Rings, Frodo's feeling of being stretched and damaged by his journey leads him to the Grey Havens where he can finally sail to the undying lands of the West to be healed and leave Middle-earth. He understands that there are some wounds that time cannot heal, and that there's no going back to his old life. It just doesn't resonate with him anymore. He also understands that the age of the elves are over, and it is now time for the reign of men in Middle-earth. I think these end-of-an-era realizations are very similar to what it feels like for someone tuned in to the higher planes to remain stuck in the muck of the low-density physical, like butter scraped over too much bread. It's exhausting to the core, and we feel a draw to reside where our discordant frequencies align, where it resonates again. Now you can see my episode 13 through 19 for a much deeper dive on the New Earth, what it is, and when we'll go there. But let me move on to some big news. So I recently heard direct information from a very talented spiritualist friend, as I mentioned previously, whose unique form of channeling I'll delve into more in a future video. But she's perceiving an especially thin veil between the physical and the higher planes as she faces her own imminent mortality. She recently revealed that the New Earth took a major step forward on May 18th of this year. On that date, her sources say, the structure of our new home was finally completed. So instead of loosey-goosey energy ships throughout the day as you move up and down or have a moment of zen and then slide back down when someone cuts you off in traffic, the groundwork is now complete for the permanent shift to the New Earth to start accepting new full-time residents. Who? Well, those who can match its higher frequency, of course. I'm eager to hear if May 18th was significant for anybody else besides me. I've been feeling drawn to leave corporate America, as I mentioned, and when I finally did it, I was on that day. The final step in our frequency dance today is the Eckhart Tolle idea of the power of now. This is where true spiritual enlightenment and peace can be achieved by living in the present moment. He argues that human suffering and unhappiness are caused by our identification with our minds, which are constantly preoccupied with the past and future. Tolle's core message is that the present moment is all you have. The other day, I woke up at 5 a.m. with an interesting thought, and I couldn't sleep for an hour as I wrestled with it. In my dream, an unextraordinary event occurred, but the odd thing was that I clearly had a memory of the reason it happened, which was a false memory taking place in the past before the dream began. I've noticed it happened before, and even discussed it, another such dream, during my episode 12 about the brain as a world-building machine. But this time, some colleagues and I were preparing a software demo for clients, which is something I've done professionally many times in my waking life. My colleague noticed some sample text was on the screen and asked me why it was there, and I remembered entering it earlier and hadn't gotten around to updating it to something more final as I had planned. Thinking about that, I believe now I understand better what everything is now could mean. According to my Fitbit sleep tracker, that dream was part of a 5-minute REM cycle just before I woke up, but it came with history as I reached into the memories of my dream avatar. So I ask you, could our lives be like that when plugged into the waking matrix too? The shared experiences also come with memories as needed? Whoa, then how many experiences occur versus those that are just remembered on a real-time basis? Can we trust our own past when our brain is capable of building it on demand, on the fly? One thing we do know is that we only notice a small slice of our perceptions, and we only remember an even smaller slice of what we notice. So there's a lot of flexibility to create and recreate our pasts based on our beliefs as well. You can imagine an insecure person remembering all the times when they were harmed, while a braver person remembering all the times that their risks turned out just fine. Hopefully you can now see the thread running through these philosophies and many others, and start to see that this frequency alignment is another area of violent agreement among our spiritual sources. But no survey would be complete without Seth, as channeled by Jane Roberts, who coined the term, "We create our own reality." See the Creativity and Actualization section of episode 10 for more of his wisdom on this topic. Seth explains in The Nature of Personal Reality, one of my all-time favorite books, on the topic of understanding our present condition. He says, "Which you? Which world? If you are lonely, it is because you believe in your loneliness in this present point that you have acknowledged at this time. From what seems to be the past, you draw only those memories that reinforce your condition, and you project those into the future." The takeaways I'll leave you with are that frequencies can be thought of as an organizing force of our reality, our lives, and our experiences, or at least how we perceive the world around us. Frequency is a hard concept for humans to wrap our minds around because it is not one of our five senses, but it attracts us to similar frequencies and repels different frequency people, places, things, and ideas. We can use this power or feature of reality to align ourselves to higher ideals, to bring into our lives those things that we want to actualize, to bring to fruition. And I've only scratched the surface on this fascinating topic. So I want you to please pick a future event, something you want to bring into your reality, and visualize living that version of yourself as vibrantly as you can every night as you lay down in bed for the next month. See if you start to notice opportunities, synchronicities, and significant progress in your life. What do you have to lose? And maybe it'll set you on a lifelong path of managing frequencies rather than getting swept along by them. So I'll leave it there, my friends. Please follow and drop a like, and please share this with someone else who needs this information. Thank you.